Hello, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're from. This is John Watkins with PRS Pharmacy Services, and I want to thank you all for taking some time to listen to the webinar here. That Dan's going to talk about regarding dead inventory. So again, I'm John Watkins with PRS Pharmacy Services, and the gentleman giving the presentation is going to be Dan Sullivan with Datarithm. Dan, you there?
I am. Thanks for having me, John.
Of course, of course. So before we get started, so Dan's going to go speak to you for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then what we're going to do is allow some time for questions. So if you look on your, on the right side of your screen, typically is where the menu is. If you look under questions, you'll have the ability to type in questions. So Dan and I will answer questions at the end. Mainly Dan will. So again, as you're going through, if you have questions, be prepared to type those in. Before I turn it over to Dan, I wanted to, and I want to share my screen with you folks in 1 minute here. I wanted to just sort of give you the impetus of why this is happening. So we've known Dan for years, and as a consulting company, and we only consult with independent pharmacies, whether we're consulting a client or helping somebody with the sale or purchasing of a pharmacy, inventory always is a hot topic. It always gets talked about. And we found that a lot of people, everyone knows what inventory is, but really understanding, how inventory impacts cash flow and how, having too much of an inventory, too inflated of an inventory can really have a negative impact. So that's how this is tying into dead inventory and the impact on your business. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn this over to Dan. Dan, I want to make you the presenter here so you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay. And let me know when you can see my screen there, John.
Yep, I can see you. We're good to go.
Okay, great. So my name is, okay, thanks.
Sorry.
My name is Dan Sullivan. I am the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Datarithm. Datarithm is a cloud-based software inventory control application, and it links in with the pharmacy management system, and it helps you control your RX inventory. Today's particular topic of dead inventory is a small part of what Datarithm does, and John asked me about topics involving inventory to present on, and I said, one of the things that we always see is dead inventory and how it can really kill a pharmacy. Particularly, it can kill its cash flow. And I always use the analogy that dead inventory is kind of like inflation. Inflation's a hidden tax that's on all of us, and it really takes away our ability to purchase, our purchasing power. Well, dead inventory is like an unknown fee or unseen tax that hits a pharmacy, a community pharmacy, and it really hurts cash flow. It hurts your ability to do other things, other projects within the pharmacy that you'd like to do, because you have cash tied up on the shelf in a piece of inventory that's dead, it's not moving. So there is a legit concern about dead inventory in community pharmacy. The real costs are pretty shocking, hence the little picture here. So just inventory in general, in the business where you're carrying a lot of different items, like a community pharmacy, and those items all have different order points, different on-hand amounts, and there's large amounts of dollars tied up and large amounts of quantity tied up. There's an inherent risk involved in carrying inventory, that if you don't sell those items quickly enough, they'll lose value over time, cost you more, and shrink your profits. On the other end of that spectrum, there's an inherent risk of not carrying enough inventory. So there's this balancing act going on as you see this business guy on a tightrope over the Midtown Manhattan skyline there. And it's a natural inventory balancing act between I want to have enough inventory but not too much. And when we speak with our clients or our prospective clients, or just people at different shows and we're talking about inventory, we always ask them, how is your inventory performing? How are you doing? And they'll say those exact words. Well, we're doing okay, but we think we can do better. And that's the exact same thing as saying we want to have enough but not too much. So there's a constant balancing act between just-in-time inventory and just-in-case inventory, and which parts of your formulary are just in time and just in case, and how lean you can be in some areas, and how much extra do you want to have in other areas. So I just want to put that out there, that there's a risk involved in inventory that everybody is aware of, and it's a constant balancing act. So let's just define what dead inventory is. The general definition of dead inventory, it's any item that doesn't sell, doesn't turn. It's sitting on the shelf, collecting dust, and costing you money. In the world of community pharmacy, the definition of dead inventory narrows a little bit. And it's basically items that haven't been dispensed recently. Further to that, for today's discussion, we'd like to define what recently means. And for Datarithm, our default for the term recently is an item that hasn't been dispensed in the last 4 months. We feel like that's a solid measuring stick because it covers your 90-day fill. So for the remainder of this discussion, when you hear me say dead inventory, that's an item that hasn't been dispensed in the last 4 months. So on average, 20 to 30% of a pharmacy's inventory is, quote, dead, hasn't been dispensed in the last 4 months. So this slide here is kind of an interactive slide to get you thinking about your specific inventory, your specific pharmacy, or in some cases, if you own more than one, your pharmacies, the entire group. So if you could, everybody kind of take out a pen and paper, or at least in your mind, think about what is the on-hand value of your inventory. If you have more than one store, go ahead and combine those locations together. So your total on-hand value, an estimate of that, in your mind. And then further to that, find about 20% of that number. So if the national average, according to NCPA, is between 20 and 30% of an inventory is dead, well, let's go ahead and just use the lower end of that scale. So 20% of your total value, if you're average, and actually on the good side of average, the closer to being, not that average but good, 20% of that number. In addition, I'd like you to think about, do you have access, either through your pharmacy management system or some other kind of reporting system, do you have access to a detailed report of showing you all those items that are dead, haven't been dispensed in the last 4 months? Further to that, do you have access to specific items that are dead and in full pack or full containers? And then, of course, if they're dead in full pack, full containers, the next question is, do you have a defined workflow for sending those items back to the wholesaler? And is that workflow unique? Is an item going to repeat itself on any given list when you already know you can't send it back, so it shouldn't show up on tomorrow's list? And then the final questions here, after you've worked through these first 4 or 5 bullet points, do you have a dead inventory problem? If 20% is a pretty big number, and you don't have a defined way of getting those items back, and you don't know what's in a full pack or full container, and you don't have access to what is dead, and it's not 2 or 3 clicks away, then you might have a dead inventory problem. And how do we avoid that problem in the future? So this kind of sets it up for the cost of not doing anything, of saying, hey, I got a problem. I think I have a problem. I'm about 20% is dead. That means I'm average. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm okay. Well, there is cost of not taking action when it comes to dead inventory. And here are some costs that people think about sometimes initially, and then it kind of floats away. So if you look at them all on one page, you start to realize that there are a lot of costs that you're thinking about at different times in the inventory process. But when you see them all at once, you quickly realize that if you don't control these costs, they can be toxic. So the initial inventory capital cost is, your outlay for the product. You purchased it, you purchased the item. That's going to take cash out of your accounts, and you've invested cash into those items. So if the item doesn't move, you have cash tied up in that item. And so as it's sitting on the shelf, there is a carry cost involved. And according to NCPA as well, the monthly carry cost in community pharmacy for the average retail is 2%. So 2%, meaning if I have a drug that costs $1,000 and I purchased it, we'll say today, 31st of January, and it sits on my shelf and it doesn't move the entire month of February, that drug no longer cost me $1,000. That was the capital cost. Add 2%, it now costs me $1,020. And if it sits all March and doesn't move, it's 2% of $1,020. and it continues to compound 2% every single month, that compounding interest against you the longer it sits on your shelf. So carry cost is an item or a cost that is usually forgotten about. It is a very, because it's so small, 2%, people don't really think about that. But when you look at that over time, and then over the number of items you have in your formulary, you quickly realize the game that the wholesalers are playing, that they're trying to get as much of their product off of their shelf and into your pharmacy and on your shelves because they don't want the carry cost of their warehouses to be high. They want it to be low. They want the inventory to be moving in and out as quickly as possible. Then you have the storage cost, the cost of it sitting on your shelf, the cost of the shelf and the space that's available. It's taking up space. If it's not being profitable, it's dead. You could have a different drug or a different item there that is profitable. And you also have, the physical cost involved with not just the square footage, but if you have a cabinet or some kind of machine or some kind of safe or some kind of robot, you have costs associated with that. You want to make sure that you have items in those machines that are turning quickly. You don't want to put an item in there and take up a bay or take up a space. That item doesn't move. You could, and again, so not only is it not profitable, it's taking up space in an expensive machine. Then you have the administrative costs and costs of the employees, time and expense in working that dead inventory, of having to move it around and perhaps not rotate it correctly and things are expiring. So all these costs, I think, add up to this final cost. I kind of look at it as an addition problem, the opportunity cost. The cost of, I could be doing something else with those dollars. I could be avoiding this carry cost. I could have a more profitable item in that space or in that cabinet. And my folks that are working behind the counter could be doing something much more advantageous, to our profitability. Maybe it's working with patient care or, improving star ratings, as opposed to looking at, where's my dead inventory? This has got dust on the bottle. It's got 2 stickers. That means I'm supposed to send it back. So the opportunity cost of dead inventory is huge, and it directly relates to all these other costs. So tools that can help you control and then avoid dead inventory. And there's these 3 bullet points here, I think, really tell the whole story. Knowing your numbers, working your inventory daily, and then using some kind of system to help you control your inventory. Whether it's a system like ours, a third-party system that hooks into your pharmacy management system, or a system you develop yourself, but having some kind of system in place that engages daily inventory work in small bites, that doesn't take up a lot of time, and that feeds that to accuracy in your numbers helps you avoid dead inventory. So knowing your numbers, we have access to the pharmacy management system. Hopefully we have access then to a quick current on hand and a dollar value. We can quickly find the last date of a dispensing of a particular item. And then this last bullet point under know your numbers, this one is kind of tough. Just the general knowledge of your contract with your lead wholesaler, with your secondary wholesaler. If you're buying something on a deal site, what are the return policies? And is there a specific date that I need to be concerned with? And so everything's a little different for people, depending if you're in some kind of cooperative or group, or if you've negotiated your contract separately with your wholesalers. Understanding your date or specific limitations that you have is needed, because if you don't have that, these other 2 don't really matter. You have to know, I need 6 months dating to send this item back. And if I don't, I'm in trouble. I'm getting cents on the dollar and not my full credit. So working your inventory daily, counting it, instead of having to close your store or bring everybody in on a Sunday and do a physical count once or twice a year, why not have a system that gives you a list to count small items, bite-sized items throughout the year, to keep my on-hands accurate, that feeds me into the knowing my numbers. Return alerts, that kind of goes with this cutoff or return to wholesaler policy with your primary and secondary. Having some kind of system built in to say, I see the expiration date on this lot number, I'm going to go ahead and back up 2 months in front of my cutoff date that I know, and give myself a reminder. So if this item, needs 6 months of dating, I'm going to back up 8 months and give myself a reminder to check that item. And if that item it's still in a full pack or full container, I'm going to look at the last dispensing and I'm going to make a decision whether or not I should send that back, because I don't want it moving into that expired or short-dated stance. And then actually doing the returns. Taking the time, I would recommend at least once a week to get dead inventory off your shelf, and then eventually, once dead inventory is down, just to get excess or surplus inventory that could become dead down the road off your shelf that's not profitable. So using a system, Datarithm does this automatically for you. You don't need to use our system again. This is just bringing the topic of dead inventory into your mind. But you should be able to, or at least have access to, a forecast. What's expected to happen in the coming month here or the coming weeks for this particular drug. And then based on that forecast plus an accurate on-hand amount, do order points need to change on particular drugs? And then if I have a forecast and I have an accurate on hand and I have a good order point in place, then the result of that is we can identify surplus or excess inventory before it becomes dead. And then any system you're using should give you a return on investment. If you're going to invest cash into a system, there should be an ROI involved, and we say no less than 10 to 1. Just like your capital expenditure into your drug is going to, produce a profit, there should be an ROI there as well. So this is one pane, an example of knowing your numbers, one pane on our landing page or one cell, you can call it. And this particular location, this is one store, has 259 items that are dead. They have not been dispensed in the last 4 months. And that represents a total of 13% of their inventory from a number standpoint. From a dollar standpoint, that 259 is valued at $52,138, and that represents 26% of the dollars of total on hand. So you can see that this particular store is right in the middle there between that 20 and 30% range of dead inventory. Now further, Datarithm will show, hey, of that $52,138, 2,412 are in a full pack or full container. And this particular store is in a small chain. It's one of 10 stores. So there are opportunities to transfer items to other stores where those particular items are turning faster. There's a better chance for them to move. And that value is $4,114. So having access to this and this changing daily is important to knowing your numbers, working your inventory, and using a system. And I'll show you on this next slide here, where it stands in our system. So on our system, it's right down here. So we have, work your inventory daily. That's this part up here where what do I return today? If I'm in a chain, what do I transfer? Do I have more than one order point in a generic group? If there's a conflict, I can fix that. What needs to be liquidated? It's time sensitive. What do I count today? And what do I need to order today for like a MedSync program? I don't carry this drug. I don't want it on my shelf, but I do dispense it and I should order it. And then what is a short date buy that's safe for me to buy? Those are working in inventory daily. Tasks, small tasks that allow you to control it. You should know your numbers based on, the beginning of when you started with whatever system or your baseline snap, kind of your chalk line, and compared to now, your on hand, your surplus, the perfect amount to have, and how your turn rates improved over time. And then your different fill rates based on, who's running the order points. So here's your dead. And this look that you're seeing here on your screen, this is a company. So all 10 of those stores are combined together. And this store had a 26% rate where the company, the other 9 stores plus that one store combined, those 10, overall, they're at 23% of their inventory is, quote, dead. And that's the value of it. This is how much is in a full pack or full container. And this is what's transferable to other stores. In Datarithm, if you click on this tile, you get that report. It tells you what's supposed to go where and what's supposed to go back, in detail. But using a system, whether it's ours or somebody else's, knowing your numbers and working your inventory daily, those are all critical into controlling and avoiding debt in the future. And really right now, getting rid of identifying debt and getting rid of it is part of that workflow and doing those returns, with confidence. So this is just a reference page that I just didn't make all this stuff up. And then This is me and my contact information. And John, if people have questions, I'll field those now.
Yeah, and actually, I do see at least one here in queue. Dan, thank you. That is very good. And I'll get to this question in a second. But one of the things that we at PRS have been saying for definitely over the past year is how critical this is. It's all comes down to cash flow, which Dan had mentioned earlier. With lower reimbursements and DIR fees, all that I want to say crap you guys have to deal with. Cash flow is a struggle. So this is just a way to help really strengthen cash flow. But Dan, I want to go ahead. Let me see. I do have at least one question. We might have more. The first one is, as a startup pharmacy, setting your opening order and ensuring we have enough product when a patient walks in is crucial. So what are some tips that might be unique to approaching inventory with a startup in their 6 month in business?
Okay, so they're in their 6 months of business, which is great because when those first 6 months, you're probably everything's surplus, everything's overstocked because you're buying either by the seat of your pants, you're buying with some kind of knowledge of maybe my sister store or one of the stores that I work with. They have dispensed about this much in the past, so I think I'm going to dispense this. And there's demographics in the area, so you're guessing for those first, that first quarter for sure, those first 3 months. Once you get to about 6 months, you got enough good raw data that when you're forecasting upcoming usage and the appropriate amount, the perfect amount to have on hand, that becomes pretty accurate after about 6 months. So that's about the time where you can start really gauging, is my order point correct? Because I got 6 months worth of good data here to tell me my order point is good or not good. Ideally, once you get to 9 months, it really locks itself in. Because at 9 months, the system, any kind of system, I think worth its merit, knows after 9 months what is new, what is recurring, and what is sporadic. And if it's new or recurring, you can use math algorithms. You can select an algorithm that's going to forecast, and the system should select the lowest error best fit algorithm. The more algorithms you have, select from, the more accurate your forecast is. Datarithm has 150. And then if an item, you've been open for 6 months and you get to 9 months and it's been dispensed in 7 or fewer of those months and it's missed the last 3. Well, now it's sporadic. You don't want to probably carry that item unless you're absolutely sure you're going to need it. And so that is more a risk logic. It's not algorithm based. It's comfort level to somebody. Yes, I do want to carry that, or no, I don't. So you have some trend analysis going on in that 6 month range. So you're at the kind of the bare minimum right now to start a system, a computer system, an application like Datarithm or other. When you get to 9 months, it really locks itself in. You got some really good hard crunching data to change order points on. That's a very good question. Yeah.
All right. Let me next question. So, for example, dead inventory was, I'm trying to read, was less than 300K return, 124K transfer, 12K. So the remainder is a loss, and that is a question. I believe he's referring to.
Well, the remainder is not a loss. It's sitting there hoping to be dispensed. Yeah, it becomes a loss if you don't know your return date. But yes, of this. Let me go at this level. This is even worse here. They have $52,000 of inventory, hasn't moved in the last 4 months at this particular store. They can move of that 52, they can move 4 of it somewhere else. So now you're down to 48, and then they can move 2.5 back to the wholesaler. Say they get all 2.5 of that. Now you're down to 45,500. That is stuck at this store. And the only way out of that issue is to dispense your way out of it. But the danger is you haven't dispensed these items in 4 months. So there is a very real danger of a loss on these particular items because they're not in full packs and they don't belong somewhere else. Hopefully, maybe as time moves on, they might be able to get some more transfers in. But yeah, that number is on the way to expiredville. And so there's 2 ways to handle this. 1, get what you can back. But 2, to avoid it in the future, that loss, is get your order points right. and get the forecast accurate, so you're not overbuying on particular items. Yeah, so not quite a loss right now, but definitely it's danger. The warning light's going off.
All right, thanks, Dan. Next question. How does Datarithm handle one drug with multiple NDC numbers?
Oh, that's a good question. Right up here, there's managed generic groups. So depending on your pharmacy management system, we get the generic indicating code. And so say there's 10 items, 10 NDCs in a group. We group all those 10 together and treat it as one item. And we see the entire history for that group. And so we're going to formulate and forecast for that entire group as though it's one item. Now, if you have a managed generic group work to do, what that means is inside of that group, you can have multiple NDCs. You know, in our example, we had 10, and they all have different on hands. That's fine. We're going to sum all that up, sum up the history of all 10 of those, dispensing history over the last 2 years. You can have different order quantities for every single one of those items in the group. However, only one of those items should have an order point or a min position. That's the preferred, the one that you want first if the on hand goes below the order point. So Datarithm will actually give you a report that says you have an issue in this group, you have more than one NDC with an order point. You need to fix that. And you can fix it by going into the pharmacy management system and zeroing out the order point that you don't want and leaving the order point on the one that you do. Or in some cases, you do want an order point on that second NDC. And it's the blue pill, and it's for Mrs. Smith, and she only takes the blue pill, and she takes it, you know, it's a 30-day fill. Well, in that case, you can kick that out of the group in Datarithm, treat that one NDC as a preferred of its own, you know, as a non-generic as its own, and it'll have its own history. So you have a choice there. If you have 2 NDCs in a group with order points, you can either ungroup one or go in and fix the order point. And so that is our daily report, and that's part of knowing your numbers and working your inventory, is understanding that you have generic groups in play here. And you can regroup them however you want in Datarithm. You can say, I'm going to keep them all grouped together, or you can say, you know, I'm going to group them by pack size. I'm going to take these 5 and put them in a different group. But when you move them, you're taking all their history with them. So they're going to get their own forecast. You're treating it like a brand. When you kick one out of a group, it becomes a brand. Is how you're treating it. So very good question and common question. And that also leads to, we don't care. Datarithm doesn't care who your wholesaler is, and it doesn't care if your wholesaler makes a switch. So, you know, you ordered one NDC, another one came, it doesn't matter. As long as you only have one order point on in the group, you're good to go. Datarithm will do the analysis for you. Yeah.
All right. Next question. Can we get a copy of this PowerPoint, please? Yeah, we'll go ahead and send that out either later today or tomorrow. So yeah, that would be happy to do that. Next question. Are there any tips to handling 340B inventory as well as normal non-340B inventory together?
There are. They have reconciliation software that helps run your 340B. If you're getting your 340B from the same source as your non-340B, that helps in the return process. But if you're not, if it's getting sent to you from, you know, somebody's sending it to you to replace something that you sent out, that portion very well could be non-returnable, meaning you're stuck with that. So Datarithm helps with that from the standpoint, if I have a particular item and I order, you know, it's on hand, falls below the order point, and my pharmacy management system orders it for me. And then that product comes in, and 2 days later, I get reimbursed from the third party entity that I'm dealing with. Now I got double the inventory that I actually need. Again, if you can't send that 340B inventory back, Datarithm will at least identify the surplus inventory, and then that will allow you to say, I have double of what I actually need here. I can't send the second part back, but I definitely can send some of this first part back because I did just get that from my wholesaler. So when we call that getting dumped on, when you get dumped on by that third party, you know, extra inventory landing on you, If it's coming from your same wholesaler, most of the time they'll take that back. If it's coming from a different wholesaler, they're not going to take that back. That's part of the program you're in with the 340B. So finding the excess that's non-340B and sending that back allows you to keep from getting into this excessive inventory where some of it's going to go dead. Yeah, that's a very common thing that happens. I would suggest using a reconciliation software that allows you to kind of help you manage that 340B.
All right, Dan, thank you. Got two questions left here. Does Datarithm produce a quote-unquote transfer report for your stores? If so, how often?
Yeah, it's on demand every day. All the reports are fresh, and it does. You'll have a report from a sending store, what was being sent from your store, and then a receiving store will also have that report, an inbound report, and to that report, costs are associated. So if an item it was bought at $1.50 at one store, but you're sending it to the other store and their cost is $1.60, we'll show that in the report. And those reports are stored inside of the system in the cloud forever. As long as you're a client, you have access to that. So your accountant likes that. And if you have any kind of DEA or state board audit, when you're moving product amongst your ownership group, that's all stored electronically as well. And you can add additional information. I've always coached my clients to go ahead and take the time to add a lot number, an invoice number, and an expiration date. That way you can really track it almost down to the pill of what's been moved from one store to another. And that lot number or invoice number will show the actual true cost, because sometimes the cost file inside the pharmacy management system may be delayed.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. And as of now, the last question is, how are the process cycle counts operationalized? I've worked in a place that used a scanner that each store was sent 10 items to cycle counts.
Okay, I'll do the quick and dirty of cycle counting inside of Datarithm. There's two ways to do it, and 95% of them do it this way. I'm going to talk about this way. It's basically Datarithm is going to provide you a list based on the importance, and I'm doing my little air bunny quotes with my fingers here, of how important is that item to you. There's three different ways the item's important to you that you get to decide. One, you just want to say that item's important. We call it the custom items. And if you think of it as count buckets, so you have a custom bucket that you're going to count these items so many times a year. We'll say 12 times a year, once a month. Then all your C2s, they go into their own bucket, their own count bucket. And we would suggest counting those 12 times a year, once a month. Then the rest of the quote count buckets are dual ranked in Datarithm. The first ranking is cost, A being expensive and Z being cheap, and everything in between. The second ranking is frequency dispensed, or how quickly you're moving it, the velocity at which you're dispensing it. A, it moves, you use a ton of it. Z, you don't use it at all. It's truly dead, and everything in between. So you can see these dual ranked buckets where AA, it's real expensive and I use a lot of it, and TX, it's pretty cheap and I don't use it at all anymore. And so you'll tell the system when you first set up with Datarithm, how often do you want to count each bucket in a given year, and what days of the week do you want counts to take place. So it truly becomes randomized, and that helps with any kind of flag for diversion, because they don't know what they're counting on any given day. They just know the days of the week that they're supposed to count. The awesome part about the way I think we do it is it focuses on things that are always most important to you, and you count those things more often. And if it becomes less important behind the scenes, you don't count that as often. An example of that is, let's say 1 month, and at the end of January here, 2019, a specific drug is ranked AA. It's really expensive, and I use a lot of it. Say St. Patrick's Day comes, March 17th, or Monday, March 18th comes, and the price falls down on that particular item, and I stopped using it. It re-ranks itself as DC. You have your system set not to count this DC bucket 12 times a year like AA. You're only counting that 4 times a year. So it'll automatically adjust based on the ebb and flow between price and how often you're using it, or if it's just flat out important to you, like a controlled substance, or you've told it by custom bucket. So it randomly picks those items for you to count to keep you on pace to make sure your on hands are always accurate. There's no drift. There's no way to really fool the system. And then you count the items and tell your pharmacy management system what you found. And then we know who performed the count too. So this count was performed by so-and-so. If you find an issue with that count, you know directly who to go to. So it's a real slick way of doing it.
Great. Well, those are all the questions we had in queue. Dan, thank you again. Great presentation. Of course, great answers to the questions. Before I end, do you have anything else you want to say in closing, Dan?
Just, I really appreciate doing this with PRS. We were talking to my president and my senior account executive. We were talking a little bit ago in between the 11 o'clock version of this and the 2 o'clock version, and just about pharmacy and the shows that are coming up. And we're going to the shows that we typically go to, the ownership shows and things like that. And we were just talking about community pharmacy in general. And I made the statement, if you're not using somebody else to help you with your business and you're an owner, you're in trouble, because there's no way that you're an owner pharmacist that you can be both of those really great. You're going to have some help either being an owner, and obviously you have help being a pharmacist because you have a staff. So, the work that we do and other consultants, I think, are important as long as you can justify that ROI. And with Datarithm, the 10-to-1 ROI minimum, I think it's a pretty good bet that we can help you out.
Fully agree. Well, thank you, everyone. And as the question was asked, we will send a copy of this out either later today or tomorrow. If you have any questions, there's Dan's contact information. Please feel free to email him or call him. And I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you again, everyone. Appreciate you tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your day. Dan, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody, and we hope to see you down the road.
All right, take care. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.